Today, we're going to talk about the first critical 500 followers. And in order to do that, I have my colleague Jesper, who together with an awesome panel will be talking and discussing critical subjects of reaching the immense first goal of getting your first 500 followers. And I would like to give the word to you, Jesper, and the panel, of course. I know you have a plan, and I think we should just. Do we have any practical information before this? I think we that we both have a chat, and we also have opportunity for you. So we would like you to use in order to ask the question or presenting yourself, not questions for the panel.
Thomas, is it my turn now?
All right. Yes, it's your turn, Jesper.
Yeah, I made the critical mistake of plugging my PC into a docking station. So yeah, might have ruined at least the recording of your ending there.
Okay. It's fine.
Sorry. But yeah, let's get through some technicalities before we present. Just leave it there for now, Thomas. Before we present today's panel debaters, it's super exciting to have you all here. And as I briefly mentioned before, I'm facing the wrong cam. Oh no, I'm just sorry. So a few technicalities. As I said briefly before, this is a Zoom webinar as opposed to a Zoom meeting, which means that we have a few extra things that we can do. In the bottom of your screen of the Zoom window, you will find a button that says Q&A. If you click it, you are able to ask a question to the panel, and Thomas and I will do our best to keep an eye on this. The way it works is that I will try to merge your question whenever it fits in, and Thomas will do his best to summarize the answer given and write it so that it will also come out in writing, and you can find it once the question has been answered. Right. I think there's not much left to do other than Thomas, if you could just close down your sharing, and I will set up the pins. I will make sure to unpin Thomas and I so that you guys can focus completely on these beautiful people that we have assembled today. I will let them introduce themselves because that was part of the homework they had to do for today. So remove my pin, remove. There we go. Right. So now everybody should be mainly focusing on Mette, Emil, and Rasmus. And I think we should just, as the picture shows, start off with Emil and then move on to Rasmus. And then lastly, but not least, Mette with the introduction. Emil?
Yeah, sure. Hi, everyone. My name is Emil, and I currently work at Lego Games in their publishing team. Before that, I've worked in a couple of different game studios in Denmark, Flashbulb Games, Kilo Games, and Funday Factory. So I've worked on titles like Subway Surfers, Trailmakers, and currently Lego Builder's Journey. I do apologize if there's some background noise. I don't know how much, if you can hear seagulls and toddlers and stuff running around, but you know, living in Aarhus City is like that. Anyway, so I have 8 years of experience in marketing indie games here in Denmark, and obviously I think it's important because if you want to make money from making video games, you gotta do this. There's no way around it. Yeah. But I mean, I enjoy the discipline, but I know a lot of you don't, which is fair. A lot of you didn't get into video games or into developing video games, to market them. You got into it to create them. So I understand that it's, for some of you, you consider it a necessary evil. So let's talk some more about that later. And finally, my favorite game, I guess, is I like action RPGs, Path of Exile, Diablo 2, that kind of stuff.
Awesome. Rasmus, you're next.
Yes, hello. My name is Rasmus Jensen. I work at Bulwark Games, primarily on the 3D platformer title called Glyph, where you play as a small robot scarab who has to save the world. This is our first more mainstream game, as Bulwark Game mainly primarily focuses on VR titles. So we had a lot of new stuff to learn. And I define myself a marketing guy in indie productions, which means I'm also the social media guy and the part-time game designer guy and everything else you can wonder. I have a background in classical advertising, working in Aarhus on packaging, digital ads, and similar things. But I had the good luck of ending up in Viborg around the creative environment up there. So I could engross myself more in games animation, where I've been working for last 6-7 years now. As for my favorite game, that's Half-Life Opposing Force by Gearbox software from 1999.
Thank you very much, Rasmus. And then you're next, Mette.
Yay. Hi, my name is Mette Jacobsen, and I'm the co-founder of Galtra Studios. And we are a small indie team currently working on our debut game, Arcadia Fallen. My background is that I graduated as a master's in meteorology in Aalborg, and I worked as a programmer at a company called Science at Home on a game called Skill Labs before I started Galtra. So my current roles include being the creative director, and I'm the writer, and I'm the lead artist, on top of being the marketing person. We are a very tiny team. So my journey into marketing started with, as I think it often does with indie developers, with someone had to do it. And luckily I had a really great advisor that helped me get started. And then I have just learned by trial and error from there, making a lot of mistakes and also getting some good successes. I think most notably with our Kickstarter we had last year. And I'm very happy to be talking about this topic because I think, as it was mentioned, that a lot of indies think that marketing is this secondary thing next to game development. And I very much think that it's an integrated part of the development process. And if you do it right, you can get a lot of good stuff out of it. And my favorite game is The World Is With You. I am really into JRPGs. So yeah.
That's super awesome. Thank you so much, all three of you. So a bit about the format that we're doing today. Disclaimer, this is my first time facilitating a panel. And I will try as best as I can to make sure that you guys are having a dialogue and not just a monologue, talking about some of the topics that we have through the past 2 weeks, forwards and backwards discussed, could be fun talking about today. I've also tried to mix in the questions from the attendees that they put in when they signed up. And of course, if attendees do have any questions throughout the session, Thomas and I will do our very best to mix it in. Otherwise, we will have a general question session in the end if it doesn't fit in, or if we couldn't fit it in like that. As you could hear, everybody, these are three very different people from very different studios and who have sat over the time with very different hats on their head. Everything from sitting solely on marketing to having it just as one of their many assignments in their small studio. So I hope we can get a lot of varied answers on what we're going to be talking about. But of course, you should all remember out there that these are all opinions and personal experiences. None of this is the right answer necessarily, and definitely probably not, maybe not the right answer for whatever case you're going to be sitting in whenever you're ready to start marketing your own game at some point. So have that in mind, and if you feel like you know better, swallow that pride and sit with it and enjoy the debate that we're about to have. Okay, well, as I briefly mentioned, we've been talking a bit on Discord backwards and forwards about why this topic is super fun and different things that we could talk about. So I would like to start off by asking Rasmus, and you others also think about it and try to play into Rasmus's answer. Rasmus, when should you start showing off your game?
It's a very common question I hear a lot, also from my friends always working on new projects or sitting in there, as they say, in the basement, working away on something new and exciting. And I can see why it's something people think about very carefully, because there's always the risk of getting out too early and presenting something that might by the end turn out to be something else. But I feel as you move forward and start having the prototypes, and starting to see like what is the core of this game, what is appealing to it, and why is this fun to play. I would always recommend people of sharing products in that stage, maybe to a limited audience, of course, which will be very natural in the beginning as you're getting traction for new production, and opening up the window to see people's reaction to it, but also maybe get some initial feedback, as long as you make sure to also filter this stuff so you still stay clear to your own product and not so much what other people's expectations might be at this stage, as you still have a long way ahead of you. So yeah, I'll say as early as you have a pretty solid prototype.
Mette, in Arcadia Fallen, when did you feel like it was like the right time to show off your work at first? It can be quite intimidating, I'm sure.
Oh yeah, definitely. And I think as soon as we basically had, like we always knew we were gonna make a visual novel, so the mechanics were not something we were gonna change later. So as soon as we had like the main cast of characters and we started to have some art ready, we started showing that. And I think that's like the thing, right? Especially if you're an indie who are bootstrapping the marketing, like then there is a lot of good like lessons to be learned by getting it out early and making your mistakes while you don't have a lot of eyeballs on it yet. And then, you know, just make sure that you don't like show something that is a core mechanic and then change it. You should have some kind of like idea of what you're doing before you show it, I think.
Emil, do you have anything to add to this, or should I ask more? Because I do have a follow-up question for it.
No, I can weigh in on this, I guess. Like Rasmus said, there's the general rule for me too is as early as possible, but then again, you don't want to show off until you actually have something. But I think you have to think about why you are showing it off. One thing that a lot of indies lack in their early marketing is that they need to test their hooks, the thing that makes their games catchy. And that's something that you can do without a Steam page or anything. You can do it by uploading a GIF to Imgur or to Reddit, or by uploading a prototype video, or sending a very, very early build to just a few influencers to see if they'll pick it up. For more practical advice, the general rule is to have a Steam store page up between 6 and 12 months before your game launches in order to collect enough wish lists. Anything less than that, and you are I wouldn't say almost setting yourself up for failure, but of course that's for Steam.
Emil, would you say there are any dangers in showing off too early?
For Trailmakers, for example, we used the program that Steam had a few years back called Greenlight, and it was a community feature where people could vote on whether or not you got to release your game on Steam. We got a lot of good initial traction on putting up that Greenlight page, but the game itself changed majorly since then. There was only basically like the core concept left when it got to release. And I don't think that was a mistake at all, because it was still the core concept. So I think only thing you can do it too early if you are committing to a Steam store page for something that you're not entirely sure that you're going to make. Then I would test it with smaller test first, like the aforementioned GIFs of gameplay or other ways to show off your gameplay hook.
All right, thank you very much. Mette, you mentioned this in the chat about going viral, and how would you go viral?
Well, going viral is a bit of a, like, it's a broad concept, right? Because I mean, either it's going viral in the sense that everyone, including a bunch of people that don't want to buy your game, sees it. Or you can also go viral in your audience. So for example, with our Kickstarter, what happened was that we had picked some voice actors who had voiced games that were very similar to ours. And they all tweeted about it when the Kickstarter launched. And because they did that, our Kickstarter tweet gig went kind of viral in that specific community, which was very useful for us because it was a lot of users that fit directly into the type of game we're making. But going viral in the general meme sort of thing, I think it's a mixture of luck and having a game that fits that kind of genre, right? Because you need to have some kind of content where people can look at it and get some kind of value out of it that makes them want to share it. So they need to understand the game, or at least understand something about the game by just looking at that one GIF or one tweet or whatever. And I only think that there are certain types of games that can do that. And ours not really being that kind of game.
Yeah, I think that's a super good point. Rasmus, would you even be interested in going viral if it wasn't within a given segment group that you are super interested in impressing or getting the attention of?
Well, in regards to Glyph specifically, is that the appeal of this game is so broad and so deeply entrenched in the entire 3D platformer genre that's easily 30 years old now. So for me, going viral would be a huge boost, because I think we'll find allies in many, many places for this kind of games. Unlike the visual novel, the audience stretches very, very far and wide all of a sudden. So no, I wouldn't specifically mind, as long as I make sure to have that little watermark in the corner so people know where it's from.
Yeah, that's a very good point. Emil, you might be the most experienced here, so I want to hear this one from you. How do you keep and retain early interest?
I think that's probably one of the greatest difficulties of a small indie studio, because at the time you get the early interest is oftentimes also the time that the development is ramping up and you're more stressed than ever trying to get it through production and out the door. And at the same time, the community starts demanding stuff from you, or at least if you have an active community. So to keep them activated, you are going to have to generally give them things, right? If you are using Discord, you could feed them snippets of upcoming features for the game, especially if they've already tried it, and you can showcase some new features. If you are, have a newsletter, you can give them early access to a new game build or something like that. The important part is that you have to give them things once in a while, because once you've given the players, your potential players, something enough times, then comes the time for you to ask them for something, which is to purchase your game or wishlist it. And they're going to be much more willing to do that if you've already given them something a couple of times. What you give them will be entirely based on what kind of game you have and what kind of production you're running. If you might not even have a sort of community-based game. If you have a very, very linear story-driven game, it's super hard to build up a community around that, because they can't share any user-generated content, and all their experience with the game is almost the same, right? So yeah, it's going to be independent of your game.
Yeah, we actually have a question from one of the attendees. That is Sten, asking, Is releasing / presenting conceptual ideas as a kind of an early product test, meaning before you have a prototype, a no-go? Is it likely to get any feedback without a prototype? Does any of you have anything?
Sure. I mean, it's going to be hard for you to showcase a concept of a game, the idea of a game, without having any gameplay. People in general are not super attracted to just seeing key art or concept art of something that they don't know beforehand. So I wouldn't show anything until you have at least the bones of a prototype. In some cases, it can be very, very early. I've seen studios such as Swedish Landfall Games make GIFs of their game jams. They spend a weekend on it, they make a GIF of it, and they upload it to Imgur. See if it goes viral, they continue and put it into pre-production. But it does take, I mean, the bare bones of gameplay for people to sort of see the dream. What am I doing in this game, and why would I enjoy that?
I think it could work in some concepts if you isolate the part you want to focus on, but that will have to be the visuals, the characters, or the narrative. And we have to present a kind of outside of a gaming mentality, so people can approach it from the standalone of what it is. So if you have like a universe you need to people to look closer at, or a story you want to share, you need to find the places where people are looking at artwork and stories outside gaming to get a proper reaction. Because I agree with Emil, if there's no gameplay, it's difficult for people to fit in the pieces themselves of how this thing comes to life, if that makes sense.
Yeah, I agree. If I should add anything, I think it depends on the genre as well. Again, with visual novels and more like story-based games, you have more stuff to show at the beginning because you got characters and you got art and people are interested in that. But not all genres you will be able to do that trick. That some people want to see what the game is going to be about.
Yeah, I think it. From what I can read from the question, it might not be. This might be very graphically conceptual ideas, so something that it can show, but not necessarily understand the core gameplay of, or what it might necessarily be like to play it. But what about in the other direction? What if we have, like, I know at least a good handful of teams consisting of programmers who haven't really gotten to the beautification part of the game. Meaning it might be a game full of tic-tacs running and attacking other tic-tacs, and they would like to show this off. Not a good idea.
No, no, of course not. It's I mean, the reason you're showing it off is to get followers, and to get followers, I assume you will want to show off why they should play it, right? And the reason they should play it is because it's a new, interesting game. And why is it interesting? It has this hook. What's the hook? Well, it's a first-person shooter, multiplayer battle shooter, but you also have a portal gun. That's the hook. People can immediately see that sounds like a fun idea, and even if it's only little Unity cylinders doing the shooting and the portal gunning, they still get the grand idea. But if all you have is the shooting elements, that's not a hook. We've all seen shooters before. So I think, especially if you are showcasing it to players, they simply don't have the attention span to try and figure out what the hook is if you don't display it prominently. Perhaps if you are pitching the concept to publishers and they can read your 20-page deck with concept art and the idea of the game written out, then they can sort of see, okay, yeah, I could see this could work. But players don't have that kind of, patience.
Do you agree, Rasmus and Mette?
Well, yeah, again, I think it's a genre thing, right? Because you know your audience, and I think you could probably find, like, a collection of users who would be interested in seeing very, very early gameplay, as long as the main mechanic is clear. So if you're targeting those, then sure, and you could also target other game developers, because there is a huge community of indie developers online, and getting those people's attention and support is also a part of getting those first followers. So you could, as long as you target it to the right people and not like the end user, then I think you could pull it off in a lot of cases. Yeah.
All right. Let's see if we can find some more controversial points so you're not always so damn agreeing on each other. No, it's great. It means that at least there's still some direction you can go in, and not completely stray, of course. I'd like to ask a bit about your roles in the companies that you've been in. So all of you have been in positions where you wear many hats, roles, but how do you know how much time and resources to put into marketing, to dedicate to marketing? Rasmus, would you start?
Yeah, I'd like to. I am the happy position right now that I can dedicate a lot of time to the marketing of the product we're working on, and it's quite a blessing, because I have been in other job positions where it's always been an endless stretch to get enough time for all the 200,000 assignments you should probably get done before dinner, and then you continue to work over dinner, and then it becomes evening, and so on. So I think my better advice in regards to how much time you spend on marketing is more, be sure to schedule it within work hours as much as possible, because as soon as you start connecting to people online, as soon as you start to get the responses, the likes, the followers, the engagement, you will quickly be swallowed up in this entire thing that needs to be fed constantly. As if you don't maintain this presence online and you don't keep the retention of the users, you might have just end up losing everything to begin with. So it's better to dedicate a specific amount of hours each day and then be consistent in how much you put online and how much you interact with the players.
Well, what do you say, Emil? Rasmus mentions consistency in the of course frequency and the amount of work that you put into the marketing. Are you good at that, Mette?
Yeah, well, I think definitely consistency is key. Also, just again, if you're not the dedicated marketing person, just getting into habit of posting things will train you to become better. But I also think that you need to be very flexible, especially with social media, because sometimes stuff just happens, right? We had a stupid example with the KFC visual novel came out at some point, and that went viral because Kentucky Fried Chicken and visual novels, very cool concept. So a bunch of people were like Googling visual novels for the first time that day. And of course we made a post there and hashtag visual novel just to be in that feed when people were like scrolling through the thing, right? And you can't plan for that. You just need to be there and have some stuff ready to react when things like that happens. So it's a bit of a mixture, consistency to get into the habit, but then also just be ready to be flexible at certain times.
Emil, I can imagine you sit with the marketing head on most of the time, but you haven't always done that. Have you become more consistent, more rules regarding how you market and spend your time wisely?
I mean, like Rasmus, I've been blessed to be in a position where I can dedicate my full time to being on marketing the games. But even that comes with a bunch of different roles if you're the only one doing it for a company. All of a sudden, you're doing PR and you're doing market research and you're doing community management and you're doing user acquisition and you're doing all these sort of things. So yeah, I think Rasmus says completely right in that you should probably schedule your time and say, I'm dedicating this amount of hours every week or every day into marketing, and doing it from the very beginning, because there's marketing to be done 2 years before your game releases too. It's just another kind of marketing, right? It's the testing of the hooks. It's the market research to see if it's even a good idea to go into the genre that you are pursuing. Later on comes the pitching phase, where you are spending a lot of time setting up your store page and optimizing that, and then comes the keeping the community alive that we talked about previously, and then there's post-marketing support where you also keep a community alive and are taking their feedback on what kind of features they'd like to see in the game and stuff like that. So it's very much one of those things where the amount of effort and time that you put into it is also pretty much equivalent you get back, right? So if you only have a couple of hours every week to do it, then you're not going to get as much bang for your buck as if you had 40 hours like me.
We have an anonymous question asking if an animated teaser video that might not show much of the game itself would be a good idea for a startup, you know, to feed the interested parties while they wait. What do you think? Like, I'm also quickly thinking, sounds like a lot of work to do an animated teaser video, but I've never done one of those before. So you guys tell me, would you suggest doing this for a game that might not be ready to show actual gameplay?
So I kind of want to join in because we did that. We have an animated intro for our game. And yeah, that is a ton of work. But it also paid off for our game because again, it fit with it's a genre thing, right? Does it fit with the theme? Our animated intro was made basically to showcase the voice actors, which is one of our huge selling points. So of course it was worth it for us. And because it's a story-driven game, we of course had a bunch of teasers to what the story was going to be about in the animated intro. So it depends, like if your game is very story-based and you want to get people hooked on like the characters in the universe, then sure, go for it. But it is a ton of work.
Just to clarify, that is also something that you're using in the game. Like it's not just a commercial.
Using it everywhere. Like we paid a lot of money for that. We're just using it everywhere we can.
So would you kind of say that, would you have done it if it couldn't be used in the game as such?
Yeah, definitely. Because it's just such good material to use on social media as well. Just we can cut it into different pieces with the different like characters and make little gifs about it. With special posts to the specific voice actors and stuff. It's been very useful. So yeah.
I would say if you had the capability of doing that, I would absolutely do so. But as Mette also puts it, it comes down to the genre, but also the audience you're trying to attract. There is genres of game I would not waste my time. Like I was making a first-person shooter, unless it was like really uniquely something special, like a special location, character, storyline, or mechanics, I would not bother. That'd be like, that's something people need to play to understand. But if you're trying to appeal to like the audience, the explorers out there, the people who are always looking for the next big adventure to go on, the next world to sink their teeth into and go and explore, if you can create something visually interesting, that does also act as a hook, just like, look at this weird world coming soon. And people are like, oh, okay, that might be very interesting. And like Mette said, the whole recycling part is also very useful. If you can create in a way where you can cut it into 20 pieces and keep using it for 2 years, maybe also inside the game, then it will not have been a wasted effort, even if it does not become a huge viral hit when you release it.
Yeah, I mean, how do you decide how much effort to put into like an animated teaser video?
I think Mette is absolutely right in that it's a genre-specific thing, and that it would fit well if you're making probably a visual novel, but not so much a first-person shooter. And I think it makes me think of the fact that a lot of indies probably are trying to emulate two big game studios when they are considering their marketing. If you're looking at what Blizzard is doing and thinking, yeah, we'll do a Blizzard campaign, right? Make a big splashy cinematic, have that shown at Gamescom, and people will be super hyped for my game. But it's a super bad idea. For the first, yeah, it takes an insane effort to make a cinematic, even a short one. Either an insane effort from you or an insane amount of money from someone else to do it. I think if I was advising for some generic game, I would probably advise against it and make them focus on showing gameplay so people can see what they're getting into why they should buy the game. And yeah.
Very great. I have a big one here, one that Rasmus actually suggested. So how much user feedback should you listen to? And then how much of it should you bring back to the team? That's quite a big one, because
Nice. I like
you
that
know,
one.
yeah, you get a lot of input, right?
For sure.
Good and bad.
You get a little bit probably before your game comes out, right? You have a little loyal fan base that are waiting to get the game when it comes out, and they don't know maybe for sure what the game is going to be unless they've tried an early build, and then their feedback is even better. And then you get, if the launch goes well, you get a ton of feedback once it launches. They want to see this, you know, you build this puzzle game, but they want a sandbox so they can make their own puzzles because yours suck. So give us a sandbox and make it Steam Workshop so they can make download their own levels. It'll have infinite replayability, and it'll be finally the hit game that it was meant to be. Or if it's a single player game, it should have had multiplayer from the beginning, because then it would have been good. I could have played it with my friends. And of course, you should listen to all feedback, but you should take everything with not just a grain of salt, but as much salt as possible. You know, these people are gamers; they are not game developers. They don't know how much effort it is to put in a feature, and they don't know how little it matters once it's released, that feature that they want in. You don't get a second launch for your game if you put a new feature in. You at the most get a bump in sales, and not as big as one as when you launched it. In Flashbulb, I always advise that you look at there's a GDC talk from the ARC Survival Evolved developers, you know, the dinosaur game, where it's called Lessons from the Trenches of Early Access. You should go watch it, it's free, I think. They have a sort of a scorecard system they use for deciding whether or not they should put in a new feature in a game, and it's they assign a score to different statements. One of the statements is, can we do it well, this feature? Does the community want it? Do we want it? Does it get us closer to 1.0? These kind of questions that you should be asking yourself before just jumping in and adding a feature to a game. Because if you just take all advice and add it, then it's going to be a bloated game, and no one wants that.
What he said.
No, I wanted you to add something about what kind of feedback. How do you decide which feedback to go back with? Like, is that for you to decide, or do you just, you know, collect it all nicely, the saltiest in the bottom and the sweetest in the top, and then you go hand it over to the programmer and say, you decide?
Well,
I think so. Oh, sorry, you first.
Okay. Well, I think it's like a community management problem to make sure that the salt becomes less, right? You want to create a space, for example, a Discord where people can come with the feedback, and you want to moderate that so the tone is nice, and you know, you want to try and educate people and be like, yeah, we can, you know, this is why we're doing things, trying to get communication up and make sure that people understand why you're doing things, right? And then it's a game design issue whether or not you should take the feedback or not. Like, if you are a good game designer, then you know whether this thing would break the feel of your game or whether or not it fits into it. And if you get like a lot of people who wanted something completely different than what you're delivering, then that is probably a sign that you have done something wrong when you drew people in, right? Because if a lot of people are saying, hey, I kind of like the single player game, but I wanted it to be the multiplayer, then you have accidentally caught a multiplayer person in your net and lured them into your thing. And maybe they thought it was multiplayer, and now they're disappointed because it wasn't. So if you get like, you're always going to get some of those. You can't really avoid that completely. But if you get a bunch of it, then you should probably consider like, what am I selling here? Why do I get a bunch of people who think they're going into this store when I'm selling this other thing?
Yeah, but like you said, I think curating is also a big part of being a community manager. but also sometimes digging a little deeper, as sometimes people will come with a really, really bad take, and you're like, whoa, this person is super rude. But I actually had some really good feedback sometimes, just like writing, why is this a big problem? Why do you feel strongly about this? Why did you come in here just to say these things? And it often showcases either some misunderstandings that, like I said, that we have set up some expectations that they had taken away from our store page or promotion material. And then what they found was not what they wanted. And now they're disappointed and they need to get those feelings out. And of course, so especially like in that case, it might make good sense to go in and look at your promotion material or your store page and say, okay, is this a common issue? If so, we should probably go in and tweak this part, as then it's not a problem with the game, it's a problem with how the message of the game.
Yeah, I completely agree. I think, and I'm tempted to say that if you're surprised by the suggestions that your players are giving in regards to your game, if it surprises you, then maybe you didn't do your market research well enough before making the game. Because let's say you're setting out to make a mini golf game, right? And you go and look at all the top mini golf games on Steam, as you should, because you are entering a genre and you should know everything about it, right? And you see all the other mini golf games, they all have level editors. Then if you don't have a level editor in yours, then everyone is going to suggest it, right? It shouldn't come as a surprise. You don't have to launch with it, but you shouldn't be surprised when everyone is saying, hey, put in the level editor. So, yeah, yes, that's the point I want to make.
Yeah, it's a super good point. And you guys were also so good at moving it on towards curating, because one thing is, of course, taking it back. Another thing is how you reply to this feedback. And you know, I think maybe at least from my point of view, the key point is always to rather undersell than oversell your game. Don't promise features. Don't go for that No Man's Sky hero game that everybody wants and they can everything. Have any of you ever made the mistake of saying something and then realizing later, we're actually not gonna? Oh, I mean, you have. Could you tell us a little bit about that? We're slowly moving into what kind of mistakes have you made?
Yeah. Well, unfortunately, it wasn't my mistake, but for Trailmakers, we had an automatic system set up where players could suggest features they'd like to see in the game, and it would pop up on a board, and people could then vote for it, right? So the more upvotes they got, it rose to the top. But I made the mistake of letting our creative director comment on it. On the feature suggestions, and one day he went in to the board and he replied to a couple of them and said, "I will personally see that this gets done." And it was insanely stupid feature that he wanted to get done, but he hadn't talked to any of the programmers to hear if it was even feasible, and it wasn't. So it just stood there, that comment, for months and months, you know, promising a lot of players a feature that would never make it into the game. There's a bunch of different ways. The people want to be heard, right? They give their suggestions and they want to know that you acknowledge it, even if you're not going to make it. So you can decide if you are going to be dismissive about it and say, yeah, listen, if you want that kind of feature, multiplayer in my blah, blah game, that's not going to happen. We don't have the manpower, or we don't have the intention to do it. Maybe the game is not for you if it has to have multiplayer. Or you can do the cowardly way and have your community upvote and download stuff, and then sort of say, well, the community not enough people want this feature, so we're not going to put it in.
What about you, Rasmus? Have you ever promised anything you weren't up for delivering?
I'm happy to say that I've not been in that situation yet, but I have unknowingly maybe created promotional material or messagings where people were really excited for something, and to go and find out maybe it was not exactly what they had hoped it to be. And that came off from misjudgment of what the target audience actually was, based contra to who actually turned out to be. So wouldn't call it much a mistake as miscommunication, which of course is also a mistake.
Yeah, I mean, even though you don't say it has multiplayer, if you don't say it doesn't have multiplayer, people are going to start coming up with all these assumptions. And of course, your golf game is going to have a level editor and all these things. So if you don't address it, they're going to have to fill it in with assumptions or expectations and such.
Yeah, the level editor hits very close to home. And of course, we can see the potential. And of course, it would be amazing. But I think that's the kind of things that I would set up. If it's feasible, I would set up as a roadmap and say, this is the thing we can do, but we need to reach these criteria of success. And it sounds mean, but it's just like, we need this many sales for us to create this commitment in the game. And you can be transparent about it, or you could be coy about it. But I think that's what many developers understand, because in the end, we also need to be able to work tomorrow. So I think it's fair to ask for some kind of user commitment, and then in return, deliver on features as they become feasible financially, basically.
Mette, if you have anything to add to this, but I also want to throw the side question here in your face from Frederik, who asked, do you have any good tips for avoiding miscommunication?
Well, the good thing about being like a three-person team is that I am the creative director, so I have to be accountable. If I go in and write something, then I also, if I write on a Discord post, then I actually have to make it in the game as well. So that's like an automatic damper on me trying to oversell stuff because I know what I have on my list of to-do things. And yeah, that I think just communication is key, right? Especially like among the team members, that everyone is on page on what is going to go in the game and what can we promise people, but also just with your audience, like be honest with people about what your game is. There is no reason to try and talk stuff up and try and make it a bigger deal than it is. People are probably going to be excited about it as it is. So just sell it as it is. Yeah.
I know at least Emil, with your previous studio, you guys had a pretty good Discord community. And I can only imagine that in there you might have had like a tiny group for the very special people, the ambassadors, the people who will basically manage your Discord for you. Would you ever throw things off, bounce them with them before putting it into public?
We did, yeah. We had a role that started out as, I think we called them trusted, but might as well call them testers, right? They got early updates to the game so they could try out the new features. And it was, for us, it was mostly a bug testing thing. But if they were very unhappy with a feature, then it would, we'd cut it before sending it out to the masses. And of course, the pitfall here is that you are showing it to your most loyal fans, which is a very, very small percentage of your player base, and they play in the game in a very specific way, at least in our case. And a huge portion of your player base might play it in a whole different way. So if all these trusted players who have 100 hours in your game all say that they want this very complicated feature and it's going to make the game great, and then you'll be okay, well, everyone all our ambassadors are saying it, and then you release it and no one uses it, or they think it's annoying or something like that.
But again, having a great community on Discord is, of course, perhaps a bit above the 500 followers framework of today. But that said, you can, of course, still use people who are very intimately familiar with the game that you're making. It could be some close friends, other indie game developers and such, and say, hey, does this seem stupid or anything? So yeah, just to put back into this 0 to 500 bucks. Asmus, do you have anything to add, or should I slowly move on?
No, I think we can move on.
All right. So let's talk a little bit about performance. I think we're going to continue this for another 7 minutes, and then we're going to move on to the trouble sharing peer-to-peer thing that I so creatively probably came up with. So yeah, let's quickly talk about performance here. How exactly how do you measure whether you are doing well or whether the recipient likes what they see? And I think this is also a little bit dependent on what platform that you're using. So let's try to be specific here and not mix up Reddit with Instagram or whatnot. Who would like to have a swing at this one?
Start. I mean, if I was 50 years older and worked in marketing, I would be talking about Net Promoter Score, which is the term for how many of the asked people would recommend your product to a friend. It's a very, very old school by now marketing thing. So, but it still works. If you ask your first 500 followers how many of them would recommend your game to their friends, then you have a pretty good indication of like a percentage of how well it's going. That's one way to measure. I don't know if any of you guys have other ideas.
Well, it's all like platform dependent, of course, but a really good trick I'd like to share, even if you only have 500 followers or less, is to utilize the Steam's own UTM feature, where you can basically use to track clicks from different platforms and see if the wishlist are not on your page. We use this all the time to see if we can get a beat of like what of all our many efforts actually pay off, where's the traffic coming from, and more specific, like what content or initiatives was it that pulled in people this time around. So for example, I can see like how many people from Twitter visit, because I have that one Twitter link that goes to our Steam page, and I use it in our posts and I use it on our profile page. And then from there on, I can get a pretty good beat on if some of the new initiatives, of course, I can also see if something gets retweeted a bunch. That's always a good sign, but that doesn't actually mean anything until people click the link and go to your product and commit to something. So that's one trick I will always recommend. Another one earlier, if you don't have a Steam page yet, is just always measuring the engagement, not so much in the retweets or shares or likes, but in the comments. Phrase things as questions or lead things into things where people have to comment or recommend or interact with your content some way or another. Because if they are willing to do so consistently, you're onto something that catches people's attention, but more importantly, something they wish to engage with. So, and that's for what I would say the early stages of the production.
Yeah, I agree with what has been said, and yeah, just in general, like looking at engagement is your key, right? Because follower counts means nothing. Of course, it's nice when people find your thing that it looks professional and there's a couple of people there, but you don't want to have a big number of followers and then no one actually interacting with your posts. Then you're not really like, we as marketing people, we kind of want to not just waste people's time. We kind of want to make stuff that also makes people happy, or at least gives them a laugh or something, right? And the way to gauge that is to see if they want to share it, if they retweet it, or whatever specific platforms equivalence of that is. Then you're doing good.
Yeah, absolutely. I agree with everything that's been said, especially the UTM tracking now that it's implemented on Steam is good. It's not perfect, but it's good. For every piece of marketing that you are doing, whether no matter how big or small it is, you need to have a call to action, right? It could be share this post or subscribe to our YouTube channel, or it could be wishlist our game on Steam, or even later on purchase the game on Steam. But no matter what, you need to tell people what to do. If their reaction is very, very positive to what you put out, then they need to somewhere to channel that positivity and have that work for you. So ideally, wishlist on Steam, and for that call to action, it would be great if you could measure that. There's many ways of doing that, like UTM tracking, measuring how well the piece is doing.
That might also be a bit of a swing back to the how do we retain people? Like how do you make sure that you can contact them again or something if they're not part of a group or part of something that you've created and where you can see them or interact with them. That might be a good way to use a call to action.
Yeah, exactly right. In the beginning, you are swinging this very, very wide net out on the entire internet with your little piece of content, and you're trying to get them to join your little Discord server to become your loyal followers, right? But you need to have to be able to send them somewhere, and you need to figure out what place you want to send them. Is it subscribe to our mailing list, or is it join our Discord, or follow our Twitter, or something like that? It doesn't really matter as long as you're consistent in it, and that there's a place where they can go and a place where they can sort of, yeah, follow you, be one of your followers.
That also brings me, I would really like you guys to consider your favorite platform. And I know that this is going to be very, very genre specific. For instance, I can imagine that Meta, for instance, would say that she would go straight for the Reddit subs that the subreddits that are focused on digital novellas and such. Whereas Emil has probably been on some games that require a broader range and maybe a target audience that isn't as good as putting themselves together in small groups like that. Could you, Rasmus, could you name your favorite place to go and share content?
My favorite place to go is Twitter. And I'm sure many people have different preferences for how to communicate their game and how to interact with the audience. But Twitter for me has always been a good place to go, primarily because it's a place to gather up followers, use the call to actions to get them somewhere else. There's a lot of people in there, and everyone is in their own specific pockets, and you know how to infiltrate those. You can usually get to your target audience pretty easily. Twitter also has some really good Twitter ads where you can actually do lookalike campaigns. So if someone is making a game similar to yours, you can actually ask Google Ads to target their followers. There's a lot of good reasons to use Twitter. For me, it's also because Twitter has a way of becoming a pretty good business card when it reaches like a critical mass of engagement, content, followers, and the likes, where it's a really good place to direct message influencers or journalists, outlets, streamers, and whoever you want to get in contact with, people who you can see from the outside might like your game. And this is a good way of coming into engaging on them to find out if they might want to help you spread the message of this game. Meta also mentioned something that I'm very fond of myself, which is hashtag hijacking, which is basically whenever something becomes popular and is slightly related to what you work with, you should always see if you can make yourself into this Twitter feed by using the hashtag and then contextualizing around the game you're working on. So like, for example, we have a Nintendo Switch game with a ball robot in it. So when Super Mario made a new golf game, of course, we need to make sure they also know that we exist and say, hey, is there crossover potential here? I don't know. They talk about new Super Monkey Ball. Okay, is Glyph going to be in it? We don't know. But then we make it to that trending page, and then we're the weird one out on the feed, but it does bring eyeballs to it, especially if it's like genre specific, like Super Monkey Ball or Mario games. That kind of falls in within the 3D platformer niche that we're working with.
And Rasmus, here we're mainly talking about organic growth, right? Like not paid promotion and such.
Oh yes, I just brought it up because I really love that feature. But no,
yeah.
Primarily organic growth and no follow for follow culture here. People should like you because you're you and not because you like them first.
That's very beautiful. Meta, I know that. Let's try to stick with the organic. What's Galdra Studios' favorite platform in organic growth?
Surprisingly, not Reddit, but that's actually because there is a lot of Reddit is a very closed community, or the subreddit is really off now. So there's sadly a lot of gatekeeping for developers. So there is a lot of rules about self-promoting and stuff like that that makes it very difficult to get into that market without being rude. So our current favorite platform is also Twitter, but when we started out, it was actually Tumblr, because we're going for the like story games don't end at the end of the story. Then people start making fan art and they write fan fiction, and you create this whole fan community of people creating more content with these characters because they don't want the story to end. And after Tumblr kind of went and shot itself in the foot, then all those people migrated to either Instagram or Twitter, and that's why we are on Twitter now, because Instagram is difficult, and there is just a lot of features from Tumblr that are also there on Twitter. For example, the very sustainable hashtag system. So it's very easy to like tap into these communities without feeling like you're intruding.
Emil, I will also, if you have an answer, that would be great. But also, I want to merge in Felix's question here. He asked, how many platforms should you be on? And is there a golden ratio of effort used to create and maintain attention versus engagements? So, well,
okay, so let's merge them. Let's merge. See if we can answer both in one. The platform you should be on is the platform that you know well. If you were born after the towers fell and you're really into TikTok, then TikTok is could be a great medium for you to promote your game. But I wasn't, so it isn't. I don't know the medium, but I've seen a lot of game studios be very, very successful in going viral there and getting a ton of followers there and converting it to sales for their games. But I wouldn't know where to start. I would hire someone younger. But I use Twitter a lot in my private life. So I know how Twitter works. I know what kind of tone you should have on Twitter and what stuff goes viral on Twitter and how people talk to each other and what the memes are and stuff like that. So I can make good Twitter content. I don't use Facebook anymore. I'm there so I can, messenger with my family, but I don't post. I haven't posted there in 8 years or something, and I'm not interested in that. And I don't like Facebook pages. I don't want to follow a brand. So that's not for me. You should be on the places that you are familiar with. In terms of effort, I think you should be, we've said this a million times, Mette and Rasmus has too, that it's a genre fit. Not all games are supposed to have a Discord, even though everyone has a Discord now, because you might not be able to engage a Discord community with the type of game that you have. But then perhaps your game is a perfect fit for a mailing list instead. And there are modern games with hundreds of thousands of followers who have very, very successful mailing lists with very, very, very good conversion rates. They do the stuff that I've talked about earlier, which is they give a little and they give a little and give a little, and then the launch comes around and they ask for something and it works. You can look up Chris Zukowski, that's Zukowski with a Z. He is the foremost expert on email marketing for games. He has a ton of articles about how to do it well.
Yeah, I'm counting on Simon V in the audience to share a link to what was just. Yeah, he's asking how do you spell that. Can you say that one more time, Emil? And yeah. Rasmus, are you on any platforms that you're uncomfortable with? Just tracking into Emil's, because I know I'm uncomfortable with most social media platforms, so I wouldn't know where to start on this. If I was the lucky gal with the marketing hat on.
Yeah, there's working with Bolrec games. There's two platforms, at least in my feelings, I have kind of lost, hope for. One is Facebook, as Emil very well puts it, which has for me just become the place I can talk to my mom, and pretty much nothing else of interest. Maybe some events every once in a while, but even that is starting to migrate to my Google Calendar more than anything else. And as for promotional standpoints, I don't think gamers are there anymore. And if people are spending time on Facebook, it's not because they're in a mindset to start going down a rabbit hole, looking for new games to play. They are there to see what their friends are doing, the family is doing, see a funny dog video, and then move on. Another one, as Mette brought up earlier, was Reddit, where I in the past have had really great success with my content. But I don't know if the culture of the internet or Reddit is changing, but it is becoming exceedingly difficult, even with completely pure intentions, to get anything done there anymore. Even if I go to the dedicated 3D platform Nintendo crowd and say, hey, I have a game you guys might like, they're like, that sounds like, that smells like marketing, get away, you can't be here. And you're blocked. And I hate asking people for permission to say, can I share this free demo trailer here on your Reddit? They're like, nah, we don't know. To the point where I haven't given up on the platform yet, but what I do is I utilize other people to help me share things, because me as a creator are not allowed to be there anymore. So that's 2 platforms I wouldn't recommend using anymore.
Right. Well, Henrik is asking a really good question, but I also really want to move on, because I know you guys have prepared some pretty good topics to also talk about. And now Steen is also joining in with more great questions. I think we're going to move on, and then these 2 questions will have to wait until we're done with this next little bit. And we'll try to squeeze it a bit together, because I know all 3 of you are too polite to leave at 18. But I don't want to keep you till like 18, 30, 19, because I also know that some of you have seagulls or toddlers to feed. Emil. Right.
Both, yeah.
Both, yeah. Okay, so let's quickly move on to a little segment called trouble sharing peer-to-peer. I've asked all of you. I'm not sure, I didn't ask you personally, Emil. If you haven't prepared anything, that's super fine. We don't have time anyway. But I know at least Rasmus and Mette has some pretty good cases. So how it works is that Rasmus just quickly, very quickly, almost more quick than what he wrote to me, explains an issue he's had. And then the other peers, Emil and Mette, will give their suggestions to how they would have handled the situation. Also briefly, thank you very much. And then Rasmus will end off by saying how he ended up actually acting in the case, and let's see if it matches up. Otherwise, we fight. No, and then after that, Mette will have the same thing, and then immediately has something, but doesn't matter. So Rasmus, go ahead with your case.
Yeah, we sprang this on us like 2 days ago, I think, and then we had to do some soul searching and find out, oh dear, what would I be comfortable sharing at the same time? Also, what would make for some interesting talking points. And luckily, this one is pretty easy to get back into, as we have already kind of brushed against it 1 or twice during this webinar, which is the idea of like, how do you construct the message that is correct for your audience? How do you take the tools you have at your disposal and create a text, video, imagery, and similarly to the point where you know that not only will this attract what you hope and think is your audience, but your audience will also understand what the game is about. And it's a constant fear we live in a world where 600 new games is produced every week, and we are so insanely afraid of missing out, because we know our game is special, and we really, really want to show our game is special, and we're always afraid that we fail to do it correctly. And then I have an answer to this question too, but I would love to hear the feedback first.
I guess I can start then. I mean, we've been in the same situation, and our solution was to just test it. And specifically, we A/B tested it with Twitter ads, just putting up like 3 different commercials with the same target audience, and then 3 different texts, and then just seeing which one gets the most engagement. Pick that text, then change the image, 3 new images, test which gets the best engagements, and then just keep iterating until you have something where you're like, oh, this is what people get excited about. And then you learn that as well, which is also a nice bonus for your further design.
All right, yeah. Here Emil goes again about the hooks. You gotta find out what the hook of your game is, and then describe it as succinctly as possible, with as few words as possible, without using other games to describe your game. Ideally, you'll want to do it where if you remove your game name, it can't be other games. You know what I mean? You can't, if you say my game is this and this and this and this, then it has to only be able to be your game that you're describing and not your competitor's game. So work on that hook. You're going to be using it a million times. You're going to be using it in your Steam short description and Steam long description, in your pitch document to publishers. You're going to be using it when you're on the PAX show floor and someone comes up and asks, so what's this game about? He's never seen it before, and he's just walked by, and you know, the screen caught his attention, and you're going to have to say it 100 times over and over. Well, this game is about building vehicles in a physics-based world with sandbox, blah, blah, blah. Right, and it has to be good, and it has to. You really got to spend a lot of your time on really just owning this and sharpening it.
Damn, two really good answers. Did you guys prepare? I told you not to. Rasmus, so tell me, you said you had the answer.
Well, they had the answers too, obviously. And I think it's very, very nice to kind of get that echo chamber in regards to like the approach. But one other thing that also we have been using a lot is we are blessed with having a pretty big and very committed Discord community, mostly because, as Emil said, we've been pretty good at giving things. We also became the center for tests and similar. But the place is also, between this and the reviews we got, we kind of realized that people are really, really nice about telling us exactly why this game is fun. When you see a review that's like 9 out of 10 and people go in details explaining why this game is so much fun and why everyone should play it, you should listen louder and say, wow, they're actually almost promoting the game better than we are. We should probably look into see what these strong points are and make sure we also bring them to bear in our own communication. And you can get that kind of feedback very early on, already back to the prototypes. And of course, you know best of all what your game is about, but maybe some people just really good at putting into words why this got their attention, and you'll be silly nuts to take inspiration from it and carry along to your own messaging and your promotion material and etc.
Awesome. Damn, that was quick. Good job, guys. Let's try to do that one more time with Metis.
Yeah. Okay. So when we started out and opened our Twitter profile, we were posting content and we were getting followers and it was looking great. And then I went in and checked who is actually following us. And it was just a bunch of other visual novel developers, like no people, just other developers. And even if it were people, then you could read in the headlines that, oh yeah, I'm also working on this other game project. So how to reach people? Not that game developers are not people, but they are very busy and don't have time to play our games.
Yeah, that's a very common issue, especially on Twitter, because we like to band together, don't we? Especially all the indie developers, and you easily find people with 2,000 followers, but with like little substance, because it's the same 2,000 people they follow themselves to maintain this feeling of course, community and get those numbers up. A trick for us in regards to reach a player base is, of course, circumventing this mostly and going for streamers and content creators instead, as the people who watch content creators are gamers primarily more than developers. And that's been a good way for us to infiltrate. And of course, it's also the hashtag hijacking, where you often get into like the more mainstream conversations outside your own sphere. But yeah, if you're working on a visual novel game, I can easily imagine that you will start gravitate towards other creators. But you just need to make sure that you don't end up in an echo chamber or with people who actually really, really like what you're doing, but are probably not in no position to become a customer base in the end.
Yeah, Rasmus is so right that I'm just going to repeat what he said. Don't use Twitter, because that's only for the developers. Well, of course, use Twitter if you like it, but still, it's full of other developers and they play games too, of course. But it's yeah, then you can, of course, try and go viral, but as we talked about earlier, it's increasingly hard to try and go viral with your gameplay GIFs on Imgur and on Reddit and stuff like that. There's small conferences. If you want to test out on real people buy tickets to conferences. You don't have to go to PAX or Gamescom. There are small Danish conferences too, where you can get a cheap booth and show your game off, even if it's in an early stage. But I think ultimately, what we did with Trailmakers is what Rasmus said. reached out to influencers because we didn't have an audience, but they did. So we piggyback on their audience by giving them an early build, and we knew that they would be interested in it because they played similar games, right? Do your research, and then they made videos, and then the following came.
Yeah, Mette, how do you reach people and not
not game devs as magical creatures? Well, I agree. Like influencers very much help, but we actually started with follower ads, and we had a very good experience doing that. We actually got our 700 first followers just doing follower ads and didn't really have to pay a lot for it, and learned a bunch from it. And those people, like, of course, they are not as solid. Like, we saw people disappearing again afterwards. They're not as solid as normally generated followers, but they made it the page seem like there was a party there, and there were actually people commenting on stuff, and there were people sharing it. And that helped us when we then launched the Kickstarter, and we got help from the voice actors, and we commissioned some artists to share some fan art in their communities, that when they then came to our page, then it didn't look dead. And then we started seeing influx of people who had different taglines than indie dev.
That's awesome, and you did that one fast as well, even faster, I think. Emil Studsholt, you mentioned small Danish venues that you can go and market your game. And I just want to make a quick call out to Viborg, who is hosting the Viborg Game Expo here at the end of September. So could be a place for you to go and show off your game. I know they usually have a really good venue for startups. There's definitely going to be more info about that later, so keep an eye out. I think, they have a really nice URL that I forgot, but I'm going to post it in the chat in a second. But yeah, just that's it. Okay, I think it's actually going to be time, and we have more time. This went so fast. Emil, do you have an issue or like a good case that you would bring up?
I would suggest going to questions again.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Let's do that. Very good. I think we're gonna jump straight in. We have two questions regarding platforms. The first one from Henrik, who said, so far it's been about platforms then you can control. Is it a good idea to approach game critiques or magazines for wider publicity? And I think he would also appreciate you guys going a bit more into depth about these streamers, YouTubers, and influencers and such.
Yeah, I'll start. Let's just say it again, folks. Depends on your genre. We just launched Lego Builder's Journey, and it's sort of an art house experience, small little story-driven, very emotional and atmospheric. It's critic bait, you know. Critics love it. So PR worked very well for that game. Everyone covered it, and then we got a nice Metacritic rating and stuff like that. But we tried for Trailmakers. We tried for 3 years to get any big games media to write about it, and none of them did, because it's just not the kind of game that they wanted to write about, even if the game had a big following and was successful and stuff. So yeah, it depends on PR, at least for the traditional media, it depends on your genre. When it comes to influencers, there's always going to be influencers that cover the game that you are making. There are extremely niche influencers that cover only a very certain type of genre, and you have to find those, and they'll make videos of your game, and their audience is perfect because all of them play your kind of game. You'd much rather have them cover the game than Jacksepticeye to his 17 million followers, where only 5 million of them play games, and out of them only 1 million of them don't play League of Legends, and out of them only 5,000 play your genre. So yeah, focusing on the smaller influencers that cover your type of game. They're cheaper and they're more willing, and you will see a better conversion rate.
What is this?
Yeah, you go ahead, man.
Okay. I really think that one of the first things you can do as when you start marketing for a game is just make an Excel sheet and then just have a list of everyone who has said anything about any game that seems similar to yours. And that that's both YouTubers and Twitchers, of course, but it's also like journalists. Like if your game is similar to Life is Strange, then you go in and pick the name of all the journalists that wrote about Life is Strange and you put their names in a list so you have them for reference. And then you can also be like, when you send the email out to them, be like, hey, I really like what you did for this game. Here's this game. And by the way, we also have, things that is similar to that game. So there is a connection instead of you just becoming another one of their million spam mails they get from indie developers who just, blanket send out mails to everything that has ever written anything about games. Try and be specific. People appreciate it when you have done your research.
Yeah, when it comes to the press, critics, and the big outlets, some feedback I got very early on, but I always took to heart is that, especially the big sites, they have very, very little time to do anything. They're already pressed beyond belief. And they also have very small windows for indie games unless they're very extraordinary. So the example I heard is like, if they only cover 4 indie games a month, then you have to make sure you're one of those 4. And if you're not, you'll not get the attention you're seeking for. So I will also always strongly recommend, like Emil said, reaching out to influencers. You'll be surprised how many people answer if you just write them a DM and your Twitter profile actually matches something you usually play. For us, it's like any kind of like a medium-sized, bigger speedrunners, they instantly grip upon the idea of like, yeah, this actually would make for good content. Yes, I will learn to hear more about this. And then as Emil said, their audience is already primed to play this kind of game. But you also often notice the people following Twitch streamers, other Twitch streamers, who will then also go and play your game. And then it's like this ring in the water effect if you manage to make a big enough initial splash. As for critics, I don't, with the exception of like when Nintendo Live reviewed our game, it's very difficult to see what kind of traffic to generate in regards to both new customers and sales. But they're insanely valuable in regards to like the feedback and what you can learn from them just by reading closely is quite an important thing to do and curate the good and bad points. Like if you keep consistently getting the same negative points, you should need to figure out if the games need to be altered or the message need to be altered. Because frustrations about a mechanic people don't like might not be because the mechanic is bad, but just because they didn't expect it to be there. And it seems to mess with the flow of the idea of the game they had. So that's also very, and as Mette said, this is the legwork of indie game development. You will have to contact a lot of people. You have to dedicate time to it. I usually just set like made a deadline like 30 a day, 40 a day, 50 a day, and you just sit and type and grind, and you keep also refining your messaging to them. If someone answers to your solicitations, then you need to really see, okay, why did this person answer when these people did not? And you can kind of like guide it in. There's also platforms you can use as shortcuts, but it really comes down to like Mette said, and Emil also said, hitting those people who have an interest in your game to begin with. The shotgun approach will not get you anywhere.
Very great, thank you. Then we have a question from Steen, and I think this is gonna be outside of your comfort zone. So thank you very much for this one, Steen. I love it, because he's asking about business to business. Which channels or platforms would work well with reaching, he says, look at business to business non-player audiences. And I think Steen is talking about how to reach B2B. Steen, if I'm all wrong, you can quickly shout at me in the chat and I'll correct myself. But I think Mette, how would you go about if you were to reach some business to business?
Oh wow, yeah, that is very far away from what we do. But I definitely think the ground principles of reaching your audience is the same, whether it's a player or it's a business. You just need to do your research and you need to figure out where they are. If that's, a conference, meeting face to face, if it's like GDC, having a bunch of virtual meetings with people to show them your product, then that's what you're gonna do. I haven't personally done it, but the first thing I would do would be to Google it and then see what other people have done, and then just try it out, test it.
Yeah, I was going to say the same, that in regards to be successful in business to business, you need to catch people in the correct mind space to be open to the service you're selling, or the selling, because that's how I understand the question, that this is a company that wants to offer the services to other companies. In this case, I would focus on conferences, expos, meetups, social events, also very important. And if you really need to see if you can start doing some early work, I'll be using LinkedIn, as LinkedIn is very good at like maximizing like segmentation and zeroing into what you're looking for. But in regards to like sending someone a message on LinkedIn and expecting to create a customer that way, I would not bet my money on that. It has to happen at the venues where they're already coming in with the headspace of, today we would like to talk to some people about this, because the rest of the time it's a pretty good chance that you are just taking away their time and they don't have much to begin with.
Emil, do you have any final ideas?
I'm with Rasmus on this one. I think for the B2B space in games, it's very much still driven by physical presence. So expos, GDC, that kind of stuff. It's actually a very, very bad return of investment to go and show your game at a big expo like Gamescom or something, because travel expenses and booth costs and stuff like that, you're not going to make that up in conversion for your game. But if you go there for business to business stuff, set up meetings with publishers and platform holders and stuff like that, then you're going to get a good return of investment by sort of expanding your network that way.
All right, and I think on that, Steen said, great feedback, thanks. Thank you, Steen. Very polite. Right, so guys, we hit 18, and I know I could keep you here out of your own damn politeness, but I'm not gonna be doing that. So instead, I'm gonna slowly round off today and say thank you so much. You guys have all been great. For the attendees, I see some of you also have a backstop here. For the remaining attendees, I just launched because I can today, because this is a webinar. Wait, did you get it to me? Yeah, I want to know if you're satisfied as well. It's a satisfaction poll. Yeah, thank you, Simon V. You did get it. And guys, I just this was mostly for fun. I think this has been great today. So far, 0% have said it hasn't been great. So I think that's pretty good. Thank you guys so much, Emil, Mette, and Rasmus. It's been great having you. An extra little thank you to Emil for stepping up so late, because I had a bit of a trouble finding a third panelist. And thank you to Rasmus and Mette for really initially gearing up this discussion on Discord. And yeah, I'm very happy that people like this format, and we're gonna be, mixing things up and such. In regards to evaluation of this, there might, I'm not quite sure yet, I'm gonna have to discuss this behind the scenes. There might be coming an evaluation survey to your email, dear attendees. If you do get it, we would very much appreciate you answering it, because that only makes us better and stronger. And otherwise, I don't think I have anything left to say. Rasmus, Emil, Mette, do you have anything you want to close off with? Maybe some seagull noises, anything?
Yeah, I need some more seagull noises. And Emil provides some ambience from Aarhus.
Yeah. I mean, if you can bring back the Twitter handles, then if people have any more questions, they can always bombard us on Twitter.
Yeah, do that.
How do I do that?
Yeah, who had that?
Yeah. Sorry, they were on. Actually, everyone probably saw some of our promotion stuff, and there is also the Twitter handles of these lovely people. But I'm sure Thomas can also end off by showing off the Twitter handles. So as Emil said, bombard them. You can also find, I believe, all of these fine people on Discord. But yeah, Twitter is the way to go. I don't understand Twitter. I'm too old. I'm a Facebook guy. Yeah, I know, it's scary. It's not my race. But thank you guys so much for coming today. And Thomas, do you have anything to add? Thomas, you're muted if you're trying to add anything.
Here we go. I would just like to say that this session has been recorded and will be online and coming to our YouTube, as well as all the previous sessions that we've done in the first season of Road to Funding.
Yeah, those are all coming up right now. Most of them. I know, Meta, the one that your co-founder Daniel was on about Kickstarter, still needs to be worked on. But otherwise, they're all going to be at some point on our website and our YouTube for you all to enjoy. And otherwise, I have nothing else to say. But thank you so much for coming here, and have a lovely day.